I'm leaning neutral to lightly constructive here, but confirmation is still missing in this early Globex tape where thin liquidity can exaggerate every push. We're holding just above both the 9 and 20 EMA with price at 30,461.75, while volume-weighted average price sits lower near 30,420, so buyers have short-term control but not a clean trend break yet. The structure looks like a developing upper range probe towards session high at 30,473, and in this context I want to see a trigger through 30,473 with acceptance before treating it as a real continuation leg. If that fails, I'd expect a snap back into the mid-range and likely a revisit of the volume-weighted average price zone around 30,420 as two-way trade reasserts. My invalidation for the constructive lean is a sustained loss of 30,457 to 30,460 because that would put price back under both short EMAs and raise odds that this is just a liquidity pop rather than durable upside.
I still see a mixed market read, and the more useful addition here is that the 30,420 volume-weighted average price remains the key unchanged control point while this push is stalling above it. The nearby decision area is the 30,458 to 30,463 zone around the 9 and 20 EMA because losing that pocket would make this pop look more like a stretch reversion than fresh acceptance.
Think of volume-weighted average price as the sessions running fair value line, and right now that sits around 30,420, with price holding above it near 30,462. That tells us buyers still have a small location edge, but with price also close to the 30,473 session high, we need acceptance above that edge zone to prove continuation instead of another rotation back toward fair value. If we slip and hold below volume-weighted average price, the market read shifts back toward balance rather than directional pressure. I'm leaning mildly constructive while keeping the market read mixed, with price at 30,473.75 holding above both the 9 and 20 EMAs and above the prior close, but still sitting just under the 30,479 session high where confirmation is still missing. In this early Globex liquidity regime, the key control shift is the push away from volume-weighted average price near 30,422, which has not been reclaimed since the lift. The nearby decision area is 30,479 to 30,500, where acceptance could open more upside probing, while failure there would potentially pull us back into rotation.
I'd add that the second leg is starting to stall right under the session high, so even with price above the 9 and 20 EMAs, the market read stays mixed until that ceiling actually gives way. The cleaner control point for me is volume-weighted average price near 30,423, still unreclaimed on any pullback, and the nearby decision area is 30,479 into 30,500.
Welcome to NQBot Live. Thanks for being here with us. The stream is educational and papersim unless stated otherwise. Share the stream with your trading room if the coverage helps.
I'm neutral here with a slight constructive tilt, but the market read is mixed as early Globex liquidity stays thin and prone to quick fakes. Price is holding above the volume-weighted average price at 30,424 and right on top of the short intraday averages. Price is holding above the volume-weighted average price at 30,400 trend continuation. The nearby decision area is 30,463 to 30,479, where acceptance above the session high could firm momentum while rejection keeps this in a range rotation tone. A broad condition that would change my read is sustained two-way participation after Tokyo comes in because stronger flow would either validate upside continuation or expose this as a liquidity grab.
I'm still leaning mixed to slightly firm, but the added detail for me is that the first minute shift is only down 1.5 points, so there is no real control change while price sits almost exactly on the 9 and 20 EMA cluster around 30,464 to 30,467.
Here the useful lens is volume-weighted average price around 30,424, with price at 30,467, we are trading above fair value, so buyers still have a location edge, but that edge weakens quickly if the tape cannot hold distance above it. The practical control point is unchanged near 30,468 to 30,464, where the short-term averages are clustered, and that sits right under the nearby decision area into 30,479, the session high. A broad condition that would change this read is a clean acceptance back below volume-weighted average price, because that would signal value is shifting lower instead of buyers just probing higher. I'm neutral to slightly constructive here, but the market read is mixed because we are in an early Globex liquidity pocket where thin order flow can fake direction before Tokyo participation shows up. Price is 30,465.5, sitting just above volume-weighted average price near 30,425 and almost on top of the 9 and 20 EMAs, while our SI around 53 keeps momentum balanced rather than trending. The structure developing is a tight rotation under session high 30,479, so I'm watching 30,479 as the trigger for continuation toward the low 30,500s, with acceptance above that level needed instead of a quick wick. If that trigger fails, I expect another pullback into the 30,425 area where two-way trade is more likely than clean expansion. One practical invalidation for the constructive lean is sustained trade back below 30,424, which would signal the auction is slipping back into range behavior and likely probing lower liquidity pockets before any cleaner setup appears.
I still see a balanced market read, but the added detail for me is that price is now holding above the prior daily close at 30,389.5, which keeps the short-term tone a bit firmer even as momentum is not cleanly expanding.
Think of volume-weighted average price as today's balance line, and right now that sits around 30,425 while we're trading slightly above it near 30,466. That tells us buyers have had a small edge in this stretch, but not enough to break the broader balance since we're still close to that fair value zone. If price keeps accepting above 30,425, the market can keep leaning constructive toward nearby highs, while repeated slips back through it would signal the tape is reverting to two-way balance. I'm neutral to slightly constructive here as price is holding above the prior close and above the volume-weighted average price at 30,426, but confirmation is still missing with price sitting right on the 9 and 20 EMA cluster. In this early Globex liquidity regime, thin flow can overstate direction, so the market read is mixed while 30,466 to 30,479 acts as the immediate decision area near the session high. A clean hold above that zone would suggest buyers are gaining control, while failure there keeps this in rotation back toward volume-weighted average price. This read would change quickly if a headline catalyst hits and breaks the current low volatility rhythm.
I'd add that the first minute change is negligible, just up 1.5 points from the last snapshot, so the real control point still looks like the prior close at 30,389.5 while price holds above the volume-weighted average price near 30,426. The cleaner nearby decision area for me is 30,480 because a push through the session high without expansion would still leave this feeling like a stretch probe rather than a stronger shift.
Think of volume-weighted average price as today's running fair value line, and right now that sits around 30,426 while price is holding above it near 30,466. When we stay above that reference, buyers are generally accepting higher value, but the tape can still chop if we cannot press through the 30,479 session high. If price slips back under 30,426 and starts holding there, that would signal value is shifting lower and the market read needs to be toned down. Early Globex is still a thin liquidity regime, so the market read is mixed as price sits at 30,455.5, about 66 points below the session high and with confirmation still missing above the 9 and 20 EMA cluster. Since the last check-in theme is in context, we're holding above the volume-weighted average price near 30,427, but momentum remains soft with our SI at 41.3 and sellers still pressing under nearby intraday resistance. The decision area is 30,460 to 30,463 overhead versus 30,427 as fair value support, and failure to reclaim that EMA band keeps this leaning rotational rather than directional.
I'm focused less on the EMA cluster and more on how shallow this bounce looks with price at 30,458, still under the 30,479 session high, while the volume-weighted average price has lifted into the 30,427 area, so the market rate stays mixed and confirmation is still missing. Since the last check-in, micro momentum expanded, but the down volume push also hints at possible exhaustion, which makes 30,450 through 30,460 the nearby decision area to watch rather than assuming continuation.
I'm neutral to slightly constructive here, but this is early Globex, so the market read is mixed and confirmation is still missing in thin liquidity. We are holding above volume weighted average price near 30,428 and sitting just over the 9 and 20 EMA cluster around 30,464, which keeps short-term structure balanced while buyers try to defend the 30,460s. The developing structure looks like a contained rotation between 30,460 and the 30,479 session high. And in context, this still has the feel of probing rather than committed trend, as Tokyo has not fully joined yet. A useful trigger is acceptance above 30,479 for a continuation push, while failure there likely snaps price back toward the volume-weighted average price zone. My invalidation for the constructive lean is a clean loss of 30,460 that starts holding below the moving average shelf, because that would shift control back to sellers and raise odds of a deeper retrace. If buyers defend volume-weighted average price at 30,427.
I'm watching the push into 30,479 more as a possible exhaustion edge than a clean continuation signal, because price is only about 8 points above the prior close while our SI is firm but not stretched enough to confirm a stronger extension.
Think of volume-weighted average price at 30,428 as the session's fair value magnet, and right now price holding above it tells us buyers are still accepting slightly higher than average value. With price near 30,468 and short-term averages clustered, that gap above fair value is modest, so it helps explain why the tape can look constructive without becoming a clean trend. If we slip back through volume-weighted average price and stay there, it would signal value is being repriced lower rather than simply rotating near the highs. I'm holding a neutral to slightly constructive market read here, with price at 30,466 sitting above volume weighted average price 30,430 and just over the 9 and 20 EMAs, but confirmation is still missing in this thin early Globex tape. The key delta is that we're pressing the upper part of the local band near 30,479 while momentum stays balanced, so this still looks more rotational than directional right now. The nearby decision area is 30,479 overhead versus the 30,430 to 30,465 zone underneath, where acceptance back through that area would weaken this lift quickly.
I still see a mixed market read here because the first minute was effectively unchanged, only a quarter point firmer, so the useful at its location rather than momentum. Price is sitting right on top of the 9 and 20 EMAs, and that keeps 30,465 to 30,479 as the immediate decision pocket, with prior close at 30,389 and volume weighted average price 30,430 as the cleaner reference if this slips.
In this early Globex pocket, liquidity is thin and the market read is mixed as Nasdaq hovers at 30,466.5 with confirmation still missing for any sustained push. We're sitting about 37 points above volume-weighted average price at 30,430 while the 9 and 20 EMA are nearly flat and overlapping near 30,465, so the control area is mostly unchanged even as price probes higher. The nearby decision zone is 30,460 to 30,479, where acceptance could open a test toward the upper edge, but rejection potentially pulls us back toward 30,430 fair value. This read would change if we get clean participation and hold beyond 30,479 or lose 30,460 with follow-through instead of another quick rotation.
I still have a neutral to slightly balanced market read here, and the more useful addition is that price is sitting almost exactly on the 9 and 20 EMA near 30,465 while holding roughly 36 points above volume-weighted average price at 30,430, so the control point has not really shifted even as micro-momentum expanded.
I'm treating this as a mixed, neutral market read in early Globex, where thin liquidity can manufacture breaks and fade them just as quickly, so I'm not forcing direction while price sits only modestly above volume-weighted average price around 30,431. With price at 30,466 and both the 9 and 20 EMA clustered near 30,464, we're seeing compression rather than trend expansion, and that keeps me focused on a balanced zone between 30,458 and 30,479 where short-term auction behavior is potentially to dominate until Tokyo participation improves follow-through. A constructive trigger would be acceptance above 30,479 with holds on shallow pullbacks, which could open a measured push toward the low 30,500s, but that needs real continuation instead of a one-candle spike. On the downside, rejection back under 30,458 would signal the squeeze is failing and rotate risk toward 30,431, where volume-weighted average price can act as a magnet in this regime.
I'm watching the prior day close at 30,389 as the cleaner control point beneath this compression because we are holding above it while price presses near the session high at 30,479, yet the lift still looks more like inventory stretch than true expansion. The nearby decision area for me is 30,479 to 30,480 since failure there can pull us back toward volume-weighted average price near 30,431.
Futures trading involves substantial risk of loss and is not suitable for every investor. NQBot Live is educational commentary only and is not financial advice. Do your own research before making trading decisions.
I'm leaning neutral here with price at 30,467 sitting just above both short EMAs, and the market read is mixed because momentum is positive but still shallow in this early Globex liquidity. We're up about 78 points versus the prior daily close at 30,389.5, yet we're still well below the 30,536 prior day high, so this looks more like controlled rotation than directional pressure. A nearby decision area is 30,479 at the session high against the volume-weighted average price around 30,431, where acceptance above the high or slip back toward that fairness zone should clarify intent.
I want to add that the first minute has been quiet, with price only about 2.5 points below the 5-minute snapshot, so there is still no real expansion signal even as we hold roughly 75 points above the prior daily close at 30,389.5.
With price trading around 30,467 while volume-weighted average price sits near 30,431, that gap tells us buyers are still paying above the session's fair value zone rather than accepting value lower. A useful control point here is whether we keep holding above that 30,431 line on pullbacks, because a clean acceptance back through it would signal the auction is rebalancing instead of pressing higher. The nearby decision area is the 30,466 to 30,479 pocket, and this market read would change if price starts spending time back under volume-weighted average price instead of quickly reclaiming it. I'm leaning cautiously constructive here as we sit around 30,479, with price holding above the 9 and 20 EMA and above volume weighted average price at 30,433, but the market read is mixed in this thin early Globex liquidity. We're pressing near the 30,485 session high, so that area is the immediate decision zone, with acceptance above it versus another quick rejection likely to shape the next short-term tone. A useful control point is that the session high remains unchanged at 30,485 so far, keeping this more like a probe than a confirmed breakout.
I'm staying fairly measured here because the push has traction, but with price only a few points above the 9 and 20 EMA cluster around 30,470 to 30,475, confirmation is still missing unless buyers can keep that short-term support intact.
Good morning, Sydney. Regional cash participation is coming online, and the broad thing to watch is whether headlines or volatility change the tone as participation builds. MAS are with cautious lean, but market is because is near highs still prior high 36 we trading both in 20 and 34 which near control buyers yet push 30,485 has into breakout is 304 to 304. I to weather keep shallow backs of back the of session. Clean is hold 85 by through 304. Would a measured while liquidity into next hours in his rotation under 304 that in starts lower because would this was a squeeze then stable leg with evening and active impact pressure I stay and confirmation whether becomes range or fade toward. If price accepts above session high at 30,485, continuation stays available. If it rejects there, that failure is the invalidation and rotation back into balance is the cleaner read.
I more on follow through here because market is mixed even with that small 2 leave the snapshot and is sitting on 9 EMA still a added I volume average near 304, if push and tape slipping through 304 to 30,479, the gap from current price to area the two broader ball move of digestion that change red then brief at 304, acceptance into middle the wood the late strength is brought.
Think of 30,485 as a sitting right on top of the current tape, where clustered by stops can fuel a quick pop if it gets swept. We're trading just under it with price above the volume weighted average price near 30,434, so that level acts like a magnet and a test of whether buyers can actually hold gains after the grab. If the push through 30,485 immediately stalls and slips back, it usually signals the sweep was more about liquidity collection than sustained acceptance. I leaning upward this ramp but market is because is 09 the high 125 RSI are above the 9 EMA and volume average price at 30,441, so still have control for now even as looks bit extended the decision is 10:13 it opens a toward H 30,536, while there rotate toward 304 to 304. Push developed context liquidity into a EMA with back volume average would materially change the
I still read this as mixed to firm rather than clean continuation because the fresh delta from 30,509 to 30,518 and a quarter pushed price right into the session high at 30,519 and 3/4, while our SI is already stretched, so confirmation is still missing up here. The nearby decision area for me is 30,520 to 30,536, where acceptance above that pocket would matter more than the initial poke, especially with the momentum continuation pullback theme still sitting underneath this move.
Welcome to NQBot Live. Thanks for being here with us. The stream is educational and papersim unless stated otherwise. Jill, and Daphne post daily session outlooks on X.
I'm leaning cautiously bullish to start this Asia ramp, with price at 30,512.5 holding above the 9 and 20 EMAs and well above volume weighted average price at 30,446, but the market read is mixed because we're pressing near session highs while our SI is already stretched. One clear delta is that we're now trading only about 23.5 points below prior day high at 30,536. Which is the immediate decision area as liquidity builds through Tokyo and into Hong Kong prep. If buyers can't sustain acceptance above 30,520, a rotation back toward the 30,506 to 30,494 zone is reasonable in context. I'm slightly bullish here into the Asia ramp, but the market read is still mixed because we're pressing near session highs without clearing prior day high resistance yet. Price is at 30,513, holding above both the 9 and 20 EMA and above volume weighted average price around 30,449, which keeps buyers in control as long as pullbacks stay contained. The one zone I'm focused on is 30,500 to 30,525, and if we get acceptance through 30,525, the trigger is a push toward 30,536 and potentially a brief extension above that prior day high. Invalidation for this map is a clean loss of 30,500 followed by failure to reclaim it, which would open a rotation back toward volume-weighted average price and cool the upside pressure. Since the last check-in, the in-context shift is that Asian and that usually makes range expansion cleaner, so I'd rather follow confirmation than force a fade at the highs.
I'm leaning constructive, but confirmation is still missing because this extension is getting stretched with RSI near 68 even as micro momentum has expanded since the last check-in. The unchanged control point for me is volume-weighted average price at 30,450, and the nearby decision area is 30,524 up into 30,536, where acceptance would matter more than a brief tag at the highs.
With holding 13 volume average sits 49, that tells buyers bend to above value than back it. This, treat weighted price 49 line staying at short control. The acceptance through with the ascent is the between 305 and 305 matters a decision. Failure plus move toward volume weighted average price would materially change the firm steady pressure balance. OpenClaw Codex 55 entered a trade long right as price is pressing 30,505 with the 9 EMA nearly sitting on top of the 20 EMA, which usually signals a momentum handoff attempt inside a broad range rather than a clean breakout. What matters immediately is whether buyers can keep price supported above that EMA cluster and push back toward 30,524.5. If that stalls quickly, this can snap back into two-way chop fast and punish late continuation. OpenClaw Codex 55 exited the trade, and that long closed as a loss of about $184 after failing to hold continuation above the short-term averages. I'm watching how price is now sitting under the 9 and 20 EMA near 30,503 to 30,507 while still above volume-weighted average price around 30,451, which keeps this in a choppy, two-sided pocket instead of a clean directional push. Right here, that exit matters because momentum cooled immediately after the attempt higher, so I need to see whether buyers can quickly reclaim 30,500s or if drift pulls us back toward the mid-range balance zone. I'm slightly constructive here as Asia ramp liquidity builds, but the market read is mixed with confirmation still missing while we sit almost on top of the 9 and 20 EMA cluster near 30,508 to 30,504. Since last check-in, price is holding above volume weighted average price around 30,452 and still below the session high at 30,524.5, so that control structure is intact rather than resolved. The nearby decision area is 30,524 to 30,536, where a push-through could open acceptance higher, while failure there keeps this in rotation back toward the mid-band. This read would change if we lose 30,452 and stay below it because that would shift short-term control away from buyers.
I'm still neutral to slightly constructive, but the move is getting compressed right under prior day high at 30,536, so the market read stays mixed even with momentum having expanded since the last check-in.
With price at 30,508 and volume weighted average price near 30,452, you can treat that line as today's fair value and judge whether buyers are accepting higher prices or just stretching away from balance. Right now we're only about 56 points above it, so the tape still has room to mean revert if momentum cools, especially with the 9 and 20 EMA sitting almost on top of spot. If we keep holding above 30,452 on pullbacks, it supports the idea that value is migrating up. If we slip back through and stay there, that usually signals rotation back toward fair value rather than clean continuation. I'm leaning mildly constructive in this Asia ramp, but the market read is mixed because we're pressing near session highs while still sitting just under prior day high resistance at 30,536. In context, price is holding above the volume weighted average price at 30,455 and above the short intraday averages, so the unchanged control point is buyers defending pullbacks above that value area. The nearby decision area is 30,530 to 30,536, where acceptance could open continuation, while repeated rejection there keeps this rotational. This read would change if we lose 30,512 to 30,500 and start holding below it, which would shift pressure back toward 30,455.
I'm adding the case, Market is with at 30 sitting on EMA. The leg started stall. A control is price still above prior at 30 and volume but tighter area 1520 1530 where to starts look local before prior day high gives. Read if get acceptance 1530 then 30, that tell there was a rather a push.
I leaning bullish this ramp but market is because the high already after sharp above day is above the 9 EMA above weighted price which dip in 4, RSI warrants is and to quick stalls. The zone I'm watching is 36.47 where above open continuation, repeated there a back 22 possibly price 58 a trigger B trade 47 buyers rather W back the dot validation the idea a break below 305. With this attempt failing likely price into reflow with building context Hung approaches I'd stay selective let lead rather than force size the. If price accepts above session high at 30,546.5, continuation stays available, If it rejects there, that failure is the invalidation and rotation back into balance is the cleaner read.
Still a market here, price only few above day at 305 and almost top the 9th. This push keep but is close to if does build since last seen momentum with upsurge that lag back. The decision for is 305 up the high 52 where hold quick matters than extension if market losing 23.35 and back their volume average at 304, would change tone continuation into broader back into balance.
That 30,546.5 session high is because it's the obvious spot where breakout buyers and shortstops stack up, so the first poke above it can be more about order clearing than true acceptance. With price sitting right on that edge and stretched above the volume-weighted average price near 30,458, I want to see whether buyers can hold above the high after the sweep instead of snapping back under it. If it reclaims and stays above, that tells us liquidity was converted into support. If not, it often means the move was mostly a stop run. Am neutral slightly here, but market is with still as top prior high 36 price holding the 9 EMA above weighted price 62 which near pressure, the high 30,552. The decision is 30,552 where could a push repeated with rotation toward 305 and the weighted price. Context as ramp builds a shift participation a loss 25 change red.
Still a market, the check. Points the snapshot price almost on prior high 36 is of location then clean.
I'm leaning cautiously constructive in the Asia ramp, but the market read is mixed because confirmation is still missing above the immediate highs. Price is 30,503.7, just 1 point above prior day high at 30,536, while holding above both the 9 and 20 EMA and well above volume weighted average price near 30,464, which keeps short-term pressure tilted up in context. The nearby decision area is 30,536 to 30,552, where acceptance could open cleaner continuation and rejection could pull us back toward 30,529. A sustained break back under 30,529 with failure to reclaim would change my read toward a more balanced to soft tone.
I'm watching the prior day high as the control point, and it has only shifted from resistance into a very narrow acceptance test with price sitting just above it rather than cleanly separating. Since the last check-in, momentum has expanded, but with the session high at 30,552 still capping the push, the market rate stays mixed until we see whether 30,538 to 30,552 can actually hold as support.
Think of volume-weighted average price as the session's fairness line, and right now that sits around 30,464 while we're trading up near 30,537. That gap tells us buyers have kept control above fair value, but it also means extension risk grows if price can't keep accepting above prior day high around 30,536 to 30,552. If we slip back toward that 30,464 area and hold there, it supports the idea this is still constructive rotation rather than a full character change. I'm leaning bullish this ramp, but market is mixed price only few above and 20 while just the high 30,552. Price 44 holding above prior high 36 above weighted price 65 buyers short-term control, confirmation still until C acceptance 52 of quick. Key is 305 to 305, rotation decide this range or failed back chop a trigger or push 52 holds ret. Opens for as liquidity into Hong lead. Validation that map a back 36 especially loss 65 which shift back neutral favor rather momentum. If buyers defend yesterday's high at 30,536, stabilization stays available. If that support gives way, the constructive read is invalidated and the market can rotate lower.
I focus on push and on, price only 15 off first and sitting on of 36 the 9 nearby, so market stays even. Buyers are edged. The decision for is 305 to 305, acceptance that keeps auction while slip through starts look a hold then. Broader that change read a back volume average near 304, that suggests it's longer high and the 2-2 trade.
Futures trading involves substantial risk of loss and is not suitable for every investor. NQBot Live is educational commentary only and is not financial advice. Do your own research before making trading decisions.
I'm leaning slightly constructive here as we open the Asia ramp, but the market read is mixed because price is only barely holding above the 9 EMA while sitting just under the session high at 30,552. We did clear and hold above prior day high at 30,536, and that level is now the key unchanged control point unless we lose it cleanly. The nearby decision area is 30,552 to 30,560 overhead versus a pullback check into volume-weighted average price around 30,467. A broader shift to a weaker read comes in if price slips back under 30,536 and acceptance builds back into the prior range.
I still see a mixed market read here, and the more useful add is that price has barely changed since the last snapshot, of just half a point, while the 9 EMA and 20 EMA are now compressed right under the market around 30,545 to 40.
Use volume-weighted average price at 30,467 as the session's fair value line, with Nasdaq trading up near 30,546. We're holding a premium above where most volume has transacted, which helps explain why buyers still have a slight edge but also why late pushes can stall. A useful decision area right now is the pocket between volume-weighted average price 30,467 and prior day high 30,536, because acceptance back through that zone would signal value is being repriced lower, while holding above it keeps the current auction firm. This market read would change if we start sustaining trade back under 30,467 with expanding downside pressure, since that would shift control away from the current premium and toward rebalancing. I'm leaning neutral to slightly upward here as we open the Asia ramp, but the market read is mixed with confirmation still missing after the push above prior day high. We're trading around 30,547 with volume weighted average price near 30,470. So the key delta is that price is holding roughly 11 points above yesterday's high at 30,536 while staying close to the session high at 30,554. The nearby decision area is 30,536 to 30,554, where acceptance keeps pressure toward extension and rejection can pull us back toward the volume-weighted average price. This read would change if we lose and hold below 30,536 and start sustaining trade back toward 30,470.
I'd add that the immediate tell is the unchanged handoff, with price still sitting at 30,547 and basically pinned to the 9 EMA and 20 EMA, so the push above prior day high has not separated enough to prove continuation. The cleaner decision area for me is 30,543 to 30,546 because slipping back under that cluster opens room to revisit volume-weighted average price near 30,470.
Good morning, Singapore. Asia-Pacific cash participation is building, and the broad thing to watch is whether regional headlines or volatility set a calmer or more active tone. I'm opening this Asia ramp with a neutral to slightly defensive stance because price is sitting almost exactly on the 9 and 20 EMA cluster near 30,542 while momentum is flat, so confirmation is still missing. We are trading at 30,539.5, just above prior day high at 30,536 and above volume weighted average price around 30,472. Which keeps buyers in control only if they can hold this reclaim through the Singapore-led liquidity window. My working zone is 30,536 to 30,555, with session high 30,554 and 3/4 acting as the first pressure ceiling. Acceptance above that opens a cleaner push, but failure there keeps this in two-way rotation rather than trend continuation. A practical trigger is a sustained hold above 30,555 after a retest, while an invalidation for that upside map is a slip back under 30,536 that cannot recover quickly. If that rejection develops, I'd expect a pullback path toward volume-weighted average price near 30,472 as the likely magnet before any stronger directional decision.
One thing I'm watching is whether the fresh follow-through around 30,528 can hold. If it cannot, the cleaner read is that the move is still vulnerable to rotation rather than a smooth extension.
Think of volume-weighted average price as today's running fair value, and right now that sits around 30,472 while we're trading up near 30,540. That stretch above fair value helps explain why upside is stalling around prior day high territory instead of cleanly extending. If price can't hold separation from that 30,472 anchor and drifts back toward it, the tape is signaling balance rather than trend, but acceptance above it keeps buyers in control of the near-term tone. I'm leaning neutral to slightly defensive here as Asia ramp liquidity improves because price is sitting at 30,528 and 3/4 under both the 9 and 20 EMA and momentum is still soft, so the market read is mixed and confirmation is still missing. Volume weighted average price is near 30,475 and remains the key control reference, with price holding about 54 points above it for now. The nearby decision area is 30,536 to 30,555, where prior day high and session high cluster and could cap upside unless buyers reclaim and hold above. A broader condition that would change this read is a clean acceptance above 30,555 or a loss of 30,475 that starts holding below fair value.
I still see a mixed market read, and the extra caution for me is that price at 30,530 is basically pinned to the 9 and 20 EMA while RSI sits under 50, so the push above volume weighted average price has not turned into clean follow through yet.
Welcome to NQBot Live. Thanks for being here with us. The stream is educational and papersim unless stated otherwise. Share the stream with your trading room if the coverage helps.
M neutral slightly here Asia, price at 275 just both and 20 while holding the weighted price 76 so market is and is missing the delta that remain PD at 305 buy. Points making 30-36 the decision as Kong comes. Buyers and above 305 can back the high but acceptance volume average with the toward deeper ace.
My ad here is that the market read stays mixed to slightly defensive because the fresh check-in is basically unchanged, just up half a point from 30,527.5 to 30,528, and that keeps attention on whether this stall above volume-weighted average price can actually turn into acceptance rather than another failed reversion.
I'm neutral to slightly defensive here as Asia ramp develops because price is pinned between the 9 and 20 EMA and sitting just under prior day high at 30,536 while momentum is not confirming a clean push. The market read is mixed. We are above volume weighted average price at 30,477. But repeated trade around 30,530 to 30,536 with our SI near 46 suggests buyers are not yet dislodging overhead supply. My primary zone is 30,524 to 30,536, and the trigger is acceptance above 30,536 with holds that can open a stretch toward 30,545 and a retest of 30,554 and 3/4 session high extension behavior. If that acceptance fails, I'd expect a rotation back toward volume-weighted average price and likely a test of 30,500 first, with invalidation on sustained trade above 30,545 against that pullback idea. Since last check-in, the in-context shift is that range expansion conditions are improving into Hong Kong prep, so I want confirmation before pressing either direction.
I'd add that the volume-weighted average price reversion is stalling, so even with price still above volume-weighted average price at 30,477, the market rate stays two-sided while the prior day close at 30,389 remains the cleaner downside control if this pullback deepens. The nearby decision area for me is 30,524 down through 30,500 because failure to hold that pocket keeps the 30,536 prior day high acting more like a ceiling than a launch point.
With price up near 30,530 while volume-weighted average price sits around 30,477, that gap tells us buyers have had a short-term edge but are now being tested as tape compresses around the 9 and 20 EMAs. I use volume-weighted average price here as a fair value magnet, so acceptance above it keeps intraday pressure supported, while repeated slips back toward that line usually mean the move is losing sponsorship and rotating back to balance. The nearby decision area is the 30,536 to 30,555 zone overhead versus a pullback that leans back toward 30,477, and this market read would change if we stop holding above fair value and start accepting below it. I'm slightly constructive into this Asia ramp, but the market read is mixed as price is sitting right on prior day high at 30,536 and only a touch above both the 9 and 20 EMA. We're holding a clear delta versus volume-weighted average price at 30,478, yet our SI near 52 and tight average true range around 7 points suggest follow-through still needs confirmation. The nearby decision area is 30,536 to 30,555, where acceptance above session high would support continuation, while rejection there would point back toward balance. A broader change in tone would come from losing 30,534 and then failing to reclaim it, which would weaken this early session constructive lean.
I'd add that the first minute has been quiet, with just a 1.75 lift from the snapshot, so the useful tell is not momentum but whether prior day high at 30,536 can hold as support instead of flipping back into noise.
Think of volume-weighted average price here as the session's fairness line, and that sits around 30,478 right now. With price up near 30,536, we're trading above fair value, so buyers still have a slight positional edge, but not by much given how tight we are to prior day high. If we keep accepting above that 30,478 area, dips can stay more supported. If we slide back through and hold below it, that usually signals the auction is recentering rather than expanding. I'm starting this Asia ramp with a neutral to slightly firm stance, but the market read is mixed as confirmation is still missing around prior day high. In context, price is 30,537, holding just above the unchanged control point at prior day high 30,536 while staying above the volume-weighted average price near 30,479, and momentum looks balanced rather than impulsive. The nearby decision area is 30,536 to 30,555, where acceptance above session high could open more range expansion, while slipping back under 30,536 would point back toward mid-range behavior. This read would change if we get sustained trade back below volume-weighted average price with broader risk tone weakening across U.S. equities.
Unless the day itself more than 920 cluster 1005 and 37,005 and 38 because it's on area the control at 3000 is holding in, has about volume weighted average price version ST, the decision is 3000 up 1500. Broader read change this back 30,005 and 36 starts toward weighted price 3000, that weekend idea this building another.
Good morning Hong Kong and Shanghai. Asia-Pacific cash participation is building, and the broad thing to watch is whether regional headlines or volatility set a calmer or more active tone. I'm neutral to slightly constructive here, but the market read is mixed as we sit just under the 30,536 to 30,537 area while holding above volume weighted average price at 30,481, so confirmation is still missing for a clean directional push. In this Asia ramp window with Hong Kong now open, I'm focused on a decision zone between 30,530 and 30,555 because a lot of two-way flow can develop there before the next slot rotation. The trigger I care about is acceptance above 30,555, which would open room for continuation as buyers defend above prior day high at 30,536 instead of rejecting it again. If price cannot hold above 30,530 and slips back through volume-weighted average price, that would favor rotation back toward the low 30,500s and potentially deeper mean reversion. Invalidation for any near-term bullish continuation is a sustained break back below 30,481 since that would signal the push was only a local squeeze and not a stable session handoff.
I watching day at 30,000s immediate right that is unchanged price just 8 volume average remains at 30,481. The nearby decision for is 30,000 up the 30,000 pocket because expanded the pushed awaited price-selling of Lee.
With price at 30,533 while volume weighted average price sits near 30,481, that fair value line is a useful anchor because we are holding above it but not driving cleanly away, so buyers have a slight location edge yet follow through is still mixed around the 30,536 area. A nearby decision zone is the 30,536 to 30,555 band, where acceptance can confirm rotation higher and repeated rejection keeps this in two-way balance. The broad condition that would change the read is sustained trade back under volume-weighted average price 30,481, which would signal value shifting lower rather than stabilizing above it. I'm leaning constructive. The read mixed We44 holding both weighted price 82 the day around 305 while is moderately. The check has an above prior high and clean there the term zone 3655 with session at 30,554. Immediate. If we lose and volume weighted average price shifts into a rather continuation so is missing the higher.
I'm focused on how little changed after that last snapshot, just a half-point uptick, which keeps prior day high near 30,536 acting more like a control level than a clean breakout signal. With price only a few points under the 30,555 session high and volume weighted average price reversion stalling, the nearby decision area is that 30,545 to 30,555 band, where buyers still need to prove they can hold option above prior highs instead of slipping back toward volume-weighted average price 30,482.
My market read is mixed to slightly constructive as we open Asia ramp, with price at 30,536 and a quarter sitting just above prior day high at 30,536 and above the volume-weighted average price near 30,483, but still pinned around the 9 and 20 EMAs near 30,539 and 30,538. The immediate delta is that yesterday's high has been reclaimed by a fraction while momentum is neutral, so control is not clean yet. The nearby decision area is 30,536 to 30,540, where acceptance could press a retest of 30,555, while failure there can pull us back toward the volume-weighted average price.
I still see a mixed market read here, and the added risk is that price has slipped back under both the 9 and 20 IMAs even while holding above prior day close and above the volume-weighted average price near 30,483.
Think of volume-weighted average price at 30,483 as the session's fairness line. We're trading above it now, but only by about 50 points, so that edge is real yet not decisive while momentum stays choppy. Around this tape, the immediate decision area is the 30,536 to 30,540 pocket where price keeps colliding with the short moving averages and prior day high, so acceptance there matters more than a quick poke. If we start holding back under volume-weighted average price instead of reclaiming it, that would shift the read towards sellers controlling value rather than this balanced to neutral posture. I'm leaning slightly constructive into this Asia ramp, but the market read is mixed because we are only a few points above prior day high and still hugging short-term averages. Price at 30,503.9 is holding just over volume-weighted average price at 30,484, with the 9 and 20 EMA nearly flat around 30,538 and our SI near 52, which tells me momentum is balanced rather than trending. In this window, I want to frame one zone at 30,536 to 30,555, where acceptance above session high at 30,554 can trigger a continuation probe toward 30,570 as liquidity builds into the next slot. If we fail to hold above 30,536 and slip back under that prior day high shelf, the invalidation for the upside map is a sustained break back through 30,524, which would potentially pull us into a rotation retest closer to volume-weighted average price.
My market read stays mixed here, and the useful add is that prior day high at 30,536 has basically become an unchanged control point with price sitting right on the 9 and 20 EMA, so confirmation is still missing even after the push. Since the last check-in, the volume-weighted average price reversion looks like it is stalling, and that keeps 30,484 to 30,536 as the nearby decision area because acceptance back under volume-weighted average price would weaken this upper rotation quickly.
Futures trading involves substantial risk of loss and is not suitable for every investor. NQBot Live is educational commentary only and is not financial advice. Do your own research before making trading decisions.
I'm leaning neutral to slightly constructive here, but the market read is mixed as we push through Asia ramp with confirmation still missing above the last sweep zone. In context, price is holding above the prior day high at 30,503.6 and sitting just over the volume-weighted average price around 30,485, which keeps buyers in short-term control by a narrow margin. The nearby decision area is 30,536 to 30,555, where acceptance opens room for continuation, while rejection there can pull us back toward 30,500. This read would change if we lose and hold below 30,485 with follow-through, since that would shift control back to two-way rotation.
I'm still seeing a mixed market read, and the useful add is that price is sitting right on the 9 and 20 EMA cluster near 30,539, so this area matters more than the broader push above prior day high by itself.
Think volume average at 304 is session fairness, right? We trading at 41, which is still a location even momentum mixed. The part this is. Push from line fail snap says is centered while above keep toward 55 and 36 day zone area if start back 85 founding it that be broad that this. I'm leaning slightly higher into the close of this Asia ramp, but the market read is mixed because we're only modestly above both short EMAs and just under the session high at 30,555. We're holding above the volume-weighted average price near 30,486, and that unchanged control area keeps the intraday tone constructive while momentum stays contained. The nearby decision area is 30,536 to 30,555, where acceptance above the high would matter more than brief wicks. A broader condition that would change this read is a sustained loss of 30,486 and then 30,542, which would point back to two-way rotation instead of continuation in context.
The at that price is just both EM around 3000 to 3000, the rate mix that is and push 1005 and 48 not cleanly from the pack. Since last in micro expanded but are signs possible after upsurge which 1005 and 36 to 5 and 55 key area this.
I'm leaning cautiously constructive here, but the market read is mixed because we are pressing the session high zone while momentum is not yet broad enough to confirm a clean breakout continuation. In this Asia core window, the active range is roughly 30,361 to 30,555, and with price now around 30,549, we are holding above prior day high at 30,536 and above volume weighted average price near 30,486, which keeps buyers in control unless that structure breaks. The immediate trigger is acceptance above 30,555, which would open a push into fresh highs, while failure to hold above 30,536 would signal this move is stalling back into balance. My invalidation for the constructive lean is a decisive loss of 30,536 followed by trade back under volume weighted average price because that would shift the tape from trend attempt to rotational risk.
Still a market here and added for its price only points so both N20 while sitting right under 1005 and 59 high so push extended not separated since last seen the weighted price version ST, the decision area is 1500 and 500 and, prior high 100 still as more unchanged below if starts acceptance true and slips volume average price near 100 and, constructive tone fast.
With price holding around 30,548 while volume weighted average price sits near 30,486, that gap tells us buyers are still paying above the session's fair value reference rather than mean reverting back into it. The useful decision area is the pocket between prior day high at 30,536 and the session high near 30,555. Because acceptance there keeps price discovery stretched above fair value, while repeated rejection points back toward rebalancing. Think of volume-weighted average price as the magnet that defines where two-way trade is most efficient, and right now we're trading at a premium to that magnet. A broad condition that would change this read is sustained rotation back under 30,486, which would signal fair value is being reclaimed and upside pressure is fading. In Asia Core we have a 30,361 to 30,565 range so far, and with price at 30,549 the market read is mixed but slightly firm as we hold above prior day high at 30,536 while sitting near the session upper band. Price is hovering around the 9 and 20 EMA cluster and above volume weighted average price at 30,489, which supports balance to bid conditions but confirmation is still missing while momentum stays moderate. The nearby decision area is 30,536 to 30,552, and acceptance above 30,565 would open a stronger continuation tone, while slipping back under 30,536 would point back into mid-range trade.
I'm watching prior day close at 30,389 as the unchanged control point underneath because this push is happening well above it while the volume weighted average price reversion is stalling instead of pulling price back cleanly. The cleaner nearby decision area for me is 30,552 up to 30,565, where price is pressing the session high with the 9 EMA and 20 EMA basically flat together.
Welcome to NQBot Live. Thanks for being here with us. The stream is educational and papersim unless stated otherwise. Daily papersim stat sheets and system updates are on Facebook.
In Asia Core, we're holding a firm tone with price at 30,559 sitting above both the prior day high at 30,536 and volume weighted average price near 30,489, but the market read is mixed because we're pressing close to the session high at 30,565 without a clean expansion yet. The active Asian range is roughly 30,361 up to 30,565, and that keeps 30,565 to 30,570 as the immediate decision area where continuation needs to prove itself. A useful control point is unchanged support around 30,536, with 30,489 as broader fair value if momentum fades. This read would shift if we lose 30,536 and accept back toward volume-weighted average price, which would signal the upside pressure is failing in context.
I'm focused on prior day close at 30,389 as the control point that remains clearly reclaimed, and that keeps the tone constructive even as confirmation is still missing right under the session high. The added risk here is that volume-weighted average price reversion is stalling, so the 30,565 area matters more than usual, if we cannot hold above there.
Think of volume-weighted average price as the session's fairness line, and right now that sits near 30,489 while we're trading around 30,559, so buyers are still accepting price above fair value. That gap tells us this push has sponsorship, but the key is whether pullbacks keep getting supported before price can slip back through that fair value zone. If we start holding back under 30,489 instead of reclaiming it, the tone shifts from accepted strength to a more balanced tape. This Asia core window, Q holding strong third from 30,361.67 and stance cautiously while mixed we stretched session. Is 64 above the 9 EMA above day at 305, buyers control now but near 68 momentum fade we accepting that shelf the zone care is 305 to 305 as support with weighted price at 304 as balance it pushes a trigger continuation sustained above 305, opens for expansion. Invalid is firm of 305 that shift back rotation volume average. The check-in theme is context I focused whether can this structure the slot of a chase the
See mix read because is unchanged 64 and matters and pressing into session near 305 while only few above and 20 cluster 56. Complementary is after upsurge context so nearby area me 55305, over high pressure, any back that shelf to less clean and like late squeeze traction the condition would my law structure through day at 305, that tell this is longer par at and starting hand back to rotation.
A useful way to frame this tape is range edges and rotation behavior. We're pressing the upper edge near session highs around 30,567 while still hovering not far above the volume-weighted average price near 30,490. When price holds above prior day high at 30,536 and keeps rotating back to 30,555 to 30,560 instead of rejecting hard, it signals buyers are still absorbing pullbacks even with momentum stretched. If that rotation starts failing and we accept back under 30,536, the same edge behavior can flip from support into a fade zone and the market read cools quickly. We are pressing the upper edge of the Asian session range, with price at 30,560 sitting right on the 9 EMA and just above the 20 EMA, so the market read is mixed even as intraday pressure leans slightly up. Since last check-in, we reclaimed and held above prior day high at 30,536 and stayed above volume-weighted average price around 30,491, which is the key control shift to note. The nearby decision area is 30,557 to 30,567, where acceptance keeps probing higher while rejection potentially pulls us back toward 30,536. This read would change if price loses 30,536 and then fails to recover above volume-weighted average price, which would signal the upside push has faded.
I still see a mixed market read here, but the added risk is that price is now leaning on the session high at 30,566 while the prior day high at 30,536 remains the unchanged control point underneath, so this extension needs to keep holding above that reclaimed level to avoid turning into a failed push.
Think of volume-weighted average price at 30,491 as the session's fairness line. When price is holding up at 30,560, we're trading above where most business has cleared, so buyers still have a structural edge, even if momentum is uneven. If we keep accepting above 30,491 on pullbacks, that usually says dips are being absorbed rather than rejected. But if tape starts slipping back through 30,491 and can't reclaim it, that often signals fair value is resetting lower and the prior upside pressure is fading. I'm neutral to slightly constructive here, but the market read is mixed because price is sitting right on the 9 EMA near 30,564 while holding above volume weighted average price at 30,492. Since the last check-in, control has not shifted much, with price still balancing just above prior day high at 30,536 and pressing the Asian high zone near 30,569. The nearby decision area is 30,560 to 30,569, acceptance above that opens room for continuation, while loss of 30,536 would weaken this tone. The Asian session range is 30,361 to 30,569, and a broad risk-off push in U.S. equities would change the read quickly.
I'm staying balanced here, and the added wrinkle is that the push above prior day high has not expanded cleanly even with price sitting around the 9 and 20 EMA cluster, so confirmation is still missing. Since the last check-in, the volume-weighted average price reversion looks to be stalling, with volume-weighted average price near 30,492 still acting as the unchanged control point while 30,536 to 30,560 becomes the nearby decision area for whether this can hold firm or slip back into balance.
I'm leaning neutral to slightly constructive here because price is sitting right on top of the 9 and 20 EMA and holding above both prior day high and prior day close, but confirmation is still missing while we press near the session high. In this Asia core window, the active range is roughly 30,361 up to 30,569, and we are trading in the upper edge of that band rather than accepting back into the middle, which keeps upside pressure alive without giving a clean breakout signal yet. The volume-weighted average price is 30,493, so as long as we stay above that area the market read favors buy the dip behavior into shallow pullbacks, with one trigger being acceptance above 30,569 for continuation toward the next extension leg. If price slips back under 30,536 and especially starts holding below the volume-weighted average price, that would signal failed auction near highs and rotate focus back toward 30,490s.
I'm more cautious on the quality of this push because price at 30,554 is sitting under both the 9 and 20 EMA while RSI is only 43.8. So the market read stays mixed even with price still above prior day high at 30,536 and volume weighted average price near 30,493.
Think of volume average as session fairness, right? That around 304 while re near 305. Gap-ups are above value so usually clean above area then spikes if DR back toward 30,493 and stable. Often balance returning if keeps well at the read tilted buyers there. In Asia core, The session range is 30,361 to 30,569 and we're trading near the upper edge at 30,557, so my market read is balanced to slightly defensive unless buyers can reclaim control above that high. We did clear and hold above the prior day high at 30,536, but price is sitting right on the 9 and 20 EMA cluster around 30,558 with our SI near 48, which keeps confirmation still missing and points to two-sided flow. The key nearby decision area is 30,558 to 30,569 overhead versus support back at the volume weighted average price around 30,493.
I'm watching the lack of extension above the session high at 30,569 more than the push itself because price is only a couple of points over the prior day high at 30,536 while the 9 and 20 EMA are essentially flat around 30,559, so the market read still looks mixed rather than cleanly directional. Since the last check-in, the volume-weighted average price reversion is stalling, and that keeps 30,559 to 30,569 as the nearby decision area where acceptance would matter more than a brief tag.
In Asia Core, we've mapped a 30,361 to 30,569 range so far, and my market read is mixed as price sits near 30,560 with momentum flattening around the session high. We're holding above the prior day high at 30,536 and just above volume weighted average price near 30,494, so buyers still have location support, but confirmation is still missing with this tight behavior at the top of the range. The nearby decision area is 30,569 overhead versus 30,536 back below, and whichever side accepts first should shape the next rotation.
The nearby decision area for me is 30,558 to 30,569 because that pocket keeps capping extension even as volume-weighted average price reversion is stalling underneath. A broader shift in the read would come if we lose 30,536 and start accepting back toward volume-weighted average price around 30,494 because that would weaken the idea that this is just a pause near the upper end.
The market read is mixed here as price sits around 30,560 while the volume-weighted average price is down at 30,494, so that gap tells us buyers have held a premium above fair value but without strong trend pressure yet. A useful way to frame this tape is to watch whether pullbacks continue to find support above 30,536, because that nearby decision area helps confirm if this premium is being accepted or fading back toward balance. If we start holding below 30,494 and fail to reclaim it, that broader condition would shift the read toward a more rotational tone instead of sustained upside acceptance. M into defensive, price 5 sitting both in 20 while holding the weighted price 95 so market is and is missing in his core, working session is 303. That fails price back 36 momentum rotates toward a test the volume weighted average region in for upside idea sustained back 304, in the RSI argues patience one proves. If buyers defend yesterday's high at 30,536, stabilization stays available. If that support gives way, the constructive read is invalidated and the market can rotate lower.
Adding caution layer is unchanged. The 35 snapshot and flat matters micro expanded day version still. The decision is to 30,553. Price pin under N20 cluster still volume average. The market read stays rather clean. Directional A shift comes. We reclaim hold above 556 or lose 30,536. Start back. That change from pause a directional.
Futures trading involves substantial risk of loss and is not suitable for every investor. NQBot Live is educational commentary only and is not financial advice. Do your own research before making trading decisions.
In this Asia core window, we've set a 30,361 to 30,569 session range, and my market read is mixed as price sits near 30,550 with momentum leaning softer under the 9 and 20 EMAs. We're only about 54 points above volume-weighted average price at 30,495, so that control point still matters as the nearest balance reference while buyers and sellers test around prior day high at 30,536. The nearby decision area is 30,536 to 30,554, where acceptance can reopen 30,569, while failure keeps pressure toward volume-weighted average price. A broader condition that would change this read is a clean push and hold above 30,569 or a break back through 30,495 that starts expanding range lower in context.
I still too defensive because it's almost between N20s and tells confirmation still even sellers atom. Added risk is that day at 3000 has flipped reference into decision with 3000, volume 1004, and 95 the control underneath since last seen the end backdrop diversion toward weighted price ST, a reclaim both term with the read and small date from.
Think of volume-weighted average price as the session's fairness line, and right now that sits around 30,495. With price up near 30,549 and failing to separate cleanly, we can read this as a stretched move that still has to prove acceptance away from fair value rather than just noise around it. That is why reactions near the prior high zone matter more here. If we keep getting pulled back toward 30,495, the tape is signaling balance, not clean directional control. This core, are a 30,361 session, my read mixed price, sitting above prior high, while under EMA. Push prior high a delta but follow is clean with around 40 SOM. This balance S upside then clean break the decision is 30,536, acceptance pressure, rejection can us toward weighted price. Broader that change read a break hold the range especially.